This story is not about a serial killer or a complicated criminal conspiracy. It is about how a person can disappear, vanish into thin air in the wilderness, leaving behind a trail of neatly arranged belongings and a single, chilling discovery. This is the story of Ryan Hayes. Forget everything you know about standard missing person cases. What happened in August 2004 in the Sierra Nevada mountains defies all logic. Picture this: a backpack lying on a trail in the middle of a wild forest. Next to it, a neatly placed pair of sneakers. Further away are a pair of folded pants. Even further away is a shirt. A month later, off the trail, a human skull is found in a pile of branches. And nothing else. No bones, no signs of a struggle, no answers. Only silence and an oppressive feeling that something in these ancient forests defies our laws of logic. Let's start from the beginning. Ryan Hayes, a 28-year-old IT specialist from San Diego, was an ordinary guy. He wasn't an experienced survivalist or extreme sports enthusiast, but he wasn't a novice when it came to hiking either. Several times a year, he would head out into nature to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and clear his head. In August 2004, he took a short vacation and decided to go solo to Sequoia National Park. He chose the Mineral King area, one of the most picturesque but also most remote and sparsely populated parts of the park. This is not the part of Sequoia where crowds of tourists take pictures of giant trees. Mineral King is a rugged, wild area with narrow switchbacks, high passes, and trails that require good physical conditioning. Ryan planned a 3-day hike on one of the moderately complex routes and told his sister Sarah about it. On August 22nd, he sent her a final message. "Made it. It's incredible here. See you on Wednesday." Wednesday came and went, but Ryan did not get in touch. On Thursday, a worried Sarah called the park rangers. The initial search did not raise any particular concerns. In the wilderness, people sometimes get delayed, lose their way, or suffer minor injuries. The rangers checked the parking lot at the trailhead. Ryan's car was there. This was a good sign, meaning he was most likely still somewhere on the trail. A 2-person search party set out along Ryan's planned route. The weather was good, and everyone expected to find him by evening, perhaps with a sprained ankle or just tired. But what they found instantly changed the status of the operation from search to extremely concerned. About 6 kilometers from the trailhead, in an open area, they saw his backpack. It was just lying there in the middle of the trail. There were no signs of dragging or a struggle. The zippers were closed. Inside, the rangers found a map, a water bottle, some leftover food, sunscreen, Ryan's documents, and his wallet. Everything was there. The first thought was that he had left his backpack to go to the bathroom or check something nearby. But a thorough search of the surrounding area yielded nothing. No traces, no signs of human life. This was the first inconsistency. Experienced hikers know that a backpack is your life. It contains everything you need to survive. You don't just leave it behind. The rangers continued along the trail, and after 50 meters they made a second discovery, even stranger than the first. Right on the trail, side by side, were Ryan's sneakers. They weren't scattered around, as if they had flown off his feet while running or fighting. They stood, as if someone had carefully taken them off and placed them there. The laces were untied. An examination of the shoes revealed nothing unusual. Ordinary hiking sneakers, a little dusty, but without damage or traces of blood. At this point, the theory of an accident, such as a fall, began to seem unlikely. The picture was becoming more and more absurd. The searchers contacted the base by radio and requested backup. They realized that they were dealing with something out of the ordinary. While waiting for the leading group, they continued to move forward slowly, carefully examining every inch, and the discoveries continued. About 70 meters from the sneakers, off to the side of the trail, lay his pants. And again, a detail that didn't make sense. The pants were neatly folded in half. Not thrown away, not torn, but folded. This completely ruled out the possibility of a panic-stricken escape or an animal attack. Predators tear clothes. They don't fold them. A person suffering from hypothermia and paradoxical undressing would have torn his clothes off chaotically. Here, however, there was a frightening, inhuman methodicalness. 40 meters further on, the searchers stumbled upon the last remnants of Ryan's clothing, his shirt. It lay spread out on a rock by the trail. In the breast pocket, they found the keys to his apartment in San Diego and $46 in cash. The entire scene, stretching for almost 200 meters, resembled some perverted ritual. Someone had methodically disposed of his belongings, item by item, leaving them in plain sight. But the man himself was nowhere to be found. The search that followed was extensive. Dozens of rangers, volunteers, canine units, and helicopters with thermal imaging cameras took part. They combed the area square by square, examining every ravine and every crevice in the rocks. But Ryan Hayes had vanished. He seemed to have dissolved into thin air, leaving behind this strange, silent installation of personal belongings. The dogs that picked up the scent from the shirt behaved strangely. They would run several dozen meters, then start circling in place, whining and losing interest, as if the trail had gone cold. He didn't go off in a different direction, disappear by the river or the cliff. He ceased to exist. The theory that Ryan had gone mad also didn't hold up. He had no history of mental illness. His friends and family described him as a well-adjusted, calm, and rational person. Besides, even in a state of psychosis, people don't neatly fold their clothes before disappearing. The case was at a dead end. The active search was called off after 2 weeks. Ryan Hayes was officially listed as missing, but the most terrifying discovery was yet to come. A month passed. September brought coolness and silence to the Sierra Nevada mountains. The media hype surrounding Ryan Hayes' disappearance died down, and his case was in danger of joining the long list of unsolved disappearances in national parks. But Ryan's family did not give up. His sister Sarah and uncle, enlisting the help of friends and volunteers, continued to organize search parties every weekend. They methodically combed the area, straying from the main trails and looking under every rock. They were looking for anything, a scrap of fabric, any object that the official searchers might have missed. On September 28th, a little over a month after Ryan's disappearance, 2 volunteers, experienced hikers from a nearby town, decided to check the thick brush about 30 meters from where the shirt had been found. The terrain was rugged to navigate, littered with fallen trees from an old hurricane. Making his way through the windbreak, one of them noticed something strange under the roots of a massive sequoia tree that had been uprooted. It was a neat pile of dry branches and pine needles. It looked unnatural, as if someone had deliberately stacked it there. Driven by curiosity, the volunteer raked aside the branches. Something white and smooth appeared beneath them. At first he thought it was a mushroom or an unusually shaped rock. But when he threw away a few more branches, his heart sank. Staring up at him from beneath the forest debris were the empty eye sockets of a human skull. The discovery immediately sparked a flurry of activity. The Tulare County Sheriff and a medical examiner arrived on the scene. The area was cordoned off, and the most thorough search ever conducted began. The volunteers who made the discovery were questioned several times. They both stated with certainty that the pile of branches did not look like a natural formation. It resembled a nest or a hiding place, assembled with the explicit intention of concealing something. The experts working at the site were stunned. The skull lay in the center of this structure. There were no other bones, fragments of clothing, or hair around it. Only the skull, neatly placed in a makeshift cradle made of branches. A thorough search within a radius of 100 meters using metal detectors and sifting through the soil yielded absolutely nothing. The remaining 205 bones of the human skeleton had vanished. A preliminary examination of the skull at the scene revealed no apparent signs of violent death. There were no bullet holes or signs of being struck with a heavy object. The dental records obtained from Ryan's dentist in San Diego matched perfectly. There was no doubt. These were the remains of Ryan Hayes. Now the investigation was faced with an even more difficult question. What happened to the rest of the body? And why was the skull here, separate from everything else? A forensic examination conducted later only added to the mystery. The pathologist could find no clues that might shed light on the cause of death. There were no scratches or cuts on the bones, indicating the use of a knife. There were also no traces of predator teeth. This was extremely important. Bears, cougars, or a pack of coyotes would have left characteristic marks on the bones, especially on the skull. They would have gnawed on it, leaving deep scratches. Here, however, the surface of the bones was clean. The only thing the expert noted was a few small cracks in the occipital bone. Still, he could not say with certainty whether they had appeared during life or after death as a result of the natural process of the bones drying out under the pressure of branches. The official police report, published a few weeks later, was shockingly concise. It stated, "Death was the result of an accident in a remote area. The cause of death cannot be determined." For the Hayes family, it was like a slap in the face. An accident? How could an accident explain neatly folded clothes scattered over 200 meters and a skull separated from the body and hidden in a pile of branches? They tried to get the case reopened, hired private investigators, but the official version remained unchanged. The case was closed. However, in informal conversations, some people involved in the investigation said something completely different. One of the park rangers, a veteran with 30 years of experience who participated in the initial search, agreed to talk to a journalist on condition of anonymity after his retirement. His words paint a very different picture. He said that the Mineral King area had long had a bad reputation among rangers. For decades, strange reports had been coming in from tourists and hunters. Reports that never made it into the official reports were kept out to avoid scaring away visitors. They were about footprints. Footprints that looked like human ones but were abnormally large. Barefoot prints ranging from 40 to 50 centimeters long. The ranger himself had come across such footprints several times after rain on wet soil. He said they were not bear tracks. Bears have a different paw shape and claws. These prints had clear outlines of 5 toes and an arch like a human foot, but judging by their depth, the weight of the creature that left them must have exceeded 250 or even 300 kilograms. In addition, the stride length was unnatural, sometimes reaching 2 meters on flat ground. In addition to the footprints, there were also sounds. Several times, park employees who stayed overnight in remote cabins reported strange, drawn-out cries that sounded nothing like a coyote's howl or a bear's roar. It was a deep, guttural sound that some described as an imitation of an owl's cry, while others described it as a blood-curdling scream. According to this ranger, upon discovering Ryan's belongings, including his neatly folded pants and sneakers, the older employees shared the same thought, which no one dared to voice aloud. This did not look like the work of a human killer. It was more like the curiosity of something compelling with a primitive but not animalistic intelligence, a creature that didn't understand what clothes were and was studying them by taking them off one by one. This theory also explained the lack of struggle marks. Perhaps Ryan was so paralyzed with fear when he encountered this creature that he couldn't resist. Or maybe it just picked him up like a doll and carried him away. The ranger suggested that whatever took Ryan wasn't a predator in the usual sense. It didn't eat him on the spot. It carried him away to its lair as a trophy or an object to study, and the skull may have been returned later, not with malicious intent, but simply as an unnecessary part left behind in a nest of branches similar to those that these creatures are rumored to build in the forest. This hypothesis sounds wild, but it is the only one that somehow ties together all the absurd details of this case: the absence of a body, the neatly left belongings, and the strange, almost ritualistic burial of the skull. The official closure of the case did not put an end to the story. On the contrary, it marked the beginning of an unofficial investigation conducted by enthusiasts, researchers of anomalous phenomena, and, of course, the Hayes family themselves. They created a website dedicated to Ryan, where they collected all the known facts, documents, and photographs. Over time, letters began to arrive at the site. People who had visited Sequoia and neighboring national forests shared stories they had been afraid to tell the authorities for fear of ridicule. The stories began to form a frightening mosaic. One man, a hunter, recounted how in the late 1990s, in the Mineral King area, he stumbled upon a strange pyramid made of smooth river stones, almost as tall as a man. It was miles from the nearest trail or body of water, and the rocks were too heavy for one person to stack without special equipment. Near the pyramid, he felt the same oppressive feeling of being watched and heard a loud crackling of branches, causing him to flee the area in panic. Another report came from a woman whose father had worked as a lumberjack in the Sierra Nevada in the 1970s. He told her that sometimes, when they arrived at the logging site in the morning, they would find heavy logs that had been lying in one pile the night before, moved to another pile, and stacked in perfect order. There were no traces of machinery. Sometimes tools, axes, or saws would disappear and then be found a few days later, stuck in a stump in a conspicuous place. The loggers dismissed this as a joke by their colleagues, but deep down, they all knew that no one would carry logs weighing several hundred kilograms just for fun. These scattered pieces of evidence began to attract the attention of researchers studying so-called relict hominids. One of them, a former anthropologist from the University of California, Dr. Alistair Finch, devoted an entire chapter of his book to the Ryan Hayes case. Finch put forward a theory that, in his opinion, explained all the oddities of the case. He suggested that Ryan had encountered a member of a species we commonly refer to as snowman or sasquatch. Finch argued that the behavior demonstrated in this incident was not that of an aggressive predator. Instead, it was a display of investigative interest on the part of a brilliant but non-human being. According to his theory, this creature had probably never encountered a human being so closely before. It did not understand that clothing was part of a human being. Driven by curiosity, it began to disassemble Ryan like a child with a new toy. It pulled off his shoes, then his pants, then his shirt. Finch explained the neatness with which the items were left behind as a sign of the creature's ability to imitate. Perhaps it had seen Ryan or other tourists folding their clothes at the camp and tried to copy the action clumsily. The terrifying truth, according to Finch, is that the creature was most likely unaware of the fragility of the human body. With its incredible physical strength, it could have killed Ryan unintentionally simply by holding him or moving him from place to place. The cause of death may have been suffocation or a broken neck, as a result of careless handling. What about the body? Finch believes that the creature took Ryan's body with it as something unusual and interesting. It did not eat him because, in our understanding, it is not a predator. Its diet is most likely plant-based. It simply kept the body somewhere in its lair. And the skull, Finch's theory about the skull is the most gruesome. He suggests that as the body decomposed, the skull separated. The creature, not understanding its value, may have perceived it as an interesting object, similar to a stone, and it left it in one of its nests or caches made of branches, which, according to numerous reports, these creatures build throughout North America. It was not a burial, but simply the storage of a strange object. This theory explains the absence of traces of violence, the absence of other bones, and the odd behavior with the clothes. But it also paints a picture of a world in which man is not the crown of creation, but merely a fragile, incomprehensible creature that can become an object of study for the ancient masters of these forests. The most compelling confirmation of this hypothesis can be found in a story told several years later. In 2009, an experienced deer hunter was in the same area, but far away from tourist routes. It was evening. He was sitting in ambush when he heard a noise. It was not a deer or a bear. It was the heavy, measured footsteps of two legs. The hunter froze. A vast creature covered in dark fur emerged from the trees into a small clearing, moving on two legs. The hunter estimated its height to be at least 2.5 meters. It moved with remarkable grace for its size, but most importantly, it carried the carcass of a full-grown deer on its shoulder, as if it were a bag of clothes. The creature stopped, turned its head, and looked directly at the hunter. He couldn't see its eyes, but he felt its gaze, which was not filled with malice, but with intelligence and awareness. This gaze lasted several seconds, which seemed like an eternity to the hunter. Then the creature turned and disappeared silently into the forest. The hunter dropped his rifle, ran without looking back, and never returned to that place. He told his story only to those closest to him, knowing that the authorities would not believe him. The story of Ryan Hayes remains officially unsolved. This case is a reminder that there are still blank spots on our planet. And in these spots, in the shadows of giant redwoods, something may be hiding that lives by its own rules. Something so powerful that it can carry away a grown man without leaving a trace, and so alien to our understanding that it can neatly fold its victims' clothes before taking them away forever into the silent depths of the wilderness. Perhaps we will never know the answer to the question, what happened to Ryan Hayes? But his story makes us wonder, when we go into the forest, are we alone?